Hi guys, welcome to Zenith Workouts. I'm Rebecca Libby, and today I'm just going to go through in quite a bit of detail the essence, or what we're really looking for when you're doing any series where you're laying on your belly. Because being on our belly it's quite hard for a lot of us to be comfortable doing that, and there's many reasons why. And we're just going to try to look at some modifications that we can use when we're in that position, and to tune in to what we're actually asking our body to do during that exercise series. So the first thing is that if you're very tight in the front of your hips, or if you have a very rounded posture, you're older, or you got the poor draw in the genetic lottery, and you have quite a bit of roundness in the upper and mid back, when you lay on your belly, it just might not be comfortable on your low spine, because if you can't lengthen through the upper and mid back, and if you can't lengthen through the front of the hips, then you might find that all the stress goes, the discomfort's in the low back, right? So a couple things that you can do for that, if you find that you're one of those people, is you can try to give a little support underneath the low belly and the hip pointers. And you can do that with either a cushion, or if you're comfortable, like a book that's wide, wide enough to contact both your bony prominences, your bony hip pointers in the front. Or in our live classes at the studio, we have like gardening kneeling pads that are, maybe an inch thick at the most, that we can, some people place them underneath the pelvis and the low belly to give themselves the support there and to elevate that area so that they have a little more, until they get a little more mobility in the upper and mid back, or they get the hip flexors, the front of the hip, to open up a bit. So if you were going to organize that, I'll try to just with the book so that you can see a little bit more, I think, than the cushion. But you can use a cushion at home. But if you're uncomfortable laying flat on your belly, if you find that you're rounded in the low back, and then the upper back is doing all this sway and it feels a little compressed, or if it's the tension in the front of the hips, whatever the reason, you can give a try of putting a book, a cushion, a gardening pad underneath the belly and the pelvis. All right, so it's not just the belly, it's not up by your ribs. That's probably going to make things feel a little worse. It's actually hitting those hip pointers as well, right? And then that might be just a little more comfortable in your low back while we do the leg lifts, or while we practice strengthening and lifting the head and neck and a bit of the chest. So that's one modification that you can use. The other modification is really just how you place your legs, right? Because sometimes this is more for your tension in the hips, but if you find that having the legs together gives you discomfort right away in your low back, then you'll find it frustrating and maybe painful to start to try to lift the legs and add movement, right? So if you take the legs and you make them a little bit wider, like move the feet out towards the outer edges of the mat and turn the toes out a little bit, you might find that relaxes the hips enough that you can be comfortable in the low back, and you can still work on lifting the leg, doing all the movements that we're trying to do, but just with time, you'll know that your goal is to see if you can sneak those legs together, sneak those legs together, sneak those legs together, working towards the improvement, right? So however you're adapting, or maybe you don't have to modify, but when we're doing the series on our belly, our goal is really to keep from the low ribs still all the way down to and including the pelvis. And that's where we usually have a lot of issues, is that as we raise our leg, we get movement at the pelvis. We get the whole pelvis rolling forward as we lift the leg. That's one of our cheats, one of our movement patterns that we might use in everyday life, and then it translates to the mat. And that might be a fine movement pattern for some people, and for some others of us it gives us back pain. So a way to check in on that, the self-check when you're doing any of the exercises, is to, and if you don't like to turn your head to the side to do this check, you could take your little cushion, another cushion, or a little pad, a rolled up towel, put it underneath the forehead, right, so that your nose isn't squished down into the mat. But take your hands and place your fingertips underneath, between your bony hip pointers and the mat, right? And just notice, try to relax, let the legs be relaxed, the whole body be relaxed, and just try to notice how much pressure from the hip pointers against your fingers that there is. And first, when you breathe in, you're just relaxed. And as you breathe out, you want to feel like you're hollowing in your low belly. You want to feel like you're drawing that low belly from the tummy button down away from the mat, right? There's not going to be any visible space there, but that's your idea. You're not holding your breath. Breathe in to relax. On your out breath, feel the tummy draw away from the mat. Imagine that happening, and you hold that sort of sensation of the abdominals being strong. And then you're going to try to lift the right leg. And what you don't want to feel here, okay, what you do want to feel, let's say that first, is even pressure in those hip pointers, right? Release it down. Try the other side. Oh, right? And how many of you, when you raise the right leg, you feel a lot more pressure of the bone, the hip pointer on the right against the right hand? Right? So your idea, your goal is to try to keep that pressure the same. And ways to do that are to emphasize the belly drawing in. Right? Much better control. To think of the tailbone tucking down towards the mat, anchoring the pubic bone in the front to the mat. And that way when you float the leg, the pelvis, the bony pelvis, is staying more still. Other things that sometimes help are to think of activating the bum muscles before you lift the leg. So squeeze the bum, activate the right bum muscles. You can even think of having something between your bum cheeks that you're squeezing, like a little toonie or something. Or maybe something more dramatic, like a $100 bill. And you're going to hold it there, and then lift the leg. And that way you've already used the bigger muscle behind the hip, the glute that you want to use to lift the weight of the leg. You've already got that muscle turned on, and that will sometimes help you to keep that bony pelvis more still. And as you can see with my movement, just after doing this for a number of years too, I don't get any visible space between my thigh and the mat when I lift the leg. I'm quite tight in the front of the hips. I don't make it any better with my choice of sports. I love running. And I'm never going to be somebody who lifts the leg super high. I don't have that available at my hips. So just realize you might not either. Or if you're very flexible in your hips, you might get more movement than I'm demonstrating. From there, that's for the legs. The comfort in the low back when you lift the upper back, usually we'll either have the hands at the sides in a little W position, or we'll have the hands underneath the forehead. But the thought you want when you're coming up is, again, that drawing in of the low belly so that the movement isn't coming at your low back. You're rather trying to get the movement to happen between your neck and the bottom of your rib cage. So right between your shoulder blades area is where you really want that movement happening. And to do that, you'd like to think of picking up one bone of the spine at a time. So when you're starting, if you have your forehead on the mat, let's say we're in this position, you take your breath in to prepare. Before you do anything, before you lift, you draw in the low belly. You think of tucking the tailbone a little bit maybe. You can even think of squeezing the bum at first. And then I want you to think of lifting just the forehead. And then the bridge of the nose. And some instructors use the cue of if you had a marble, you'd be rolling it forward with your nose. Then lift the mouth, the chin. One bone of the neck at a time. One bone of the upper spine at a time. into between the shoulder blades. And you're stopping when you feel any movement in the pelvis. Certainly stopping before you feel any discomfort in the low back. And you're not looking up with the eyes to get this crick in your neck, right? You're keeping your gaze down and the head in line with the rest of the spine. It helps to think usually of pulling the breastbone forward, feeling like if you had a little hook on the breastbone and someone's dragging it forward, because you're going for length in the spine. And this is quite hard. I'm working hard here. I'm drawing in with the belly. I have to remember my breath. I'm thinking of lengthening the spine. And I'm also thinking of tucking the tailbone slightly, because I will pull in the movement at the low back, which is a very common thing to do. So just practice that again. Peel down. Put the forehead on the mat. And then really think about it being one bone of the back at a time with the constant drawback of the abdominals. So you're strong in the front body to support what the back body's doing. Exhale to draw in with the abdominals, and then to lift away the forehead, the bridge of the nose, the mouth, the chin, the throat to the breastbone. Drag the breastbone forward if you can, or that's just a visualization. Keep the tailbone gently tucked and draw in with the belly, and just see if that's comfortable. And I can come up this high with good form in my low spine, but maybe when you're starting, you come up a couple inches, and that's okay too. So, voila. Take a moment and bring the hands behind or under the shoulders or the rib cage. Gently press up to hands and knees. And it's always nice to follow that sort of series with a first posture of just rocking the hips back towards the heels, and you can let the head sit on the hands, or you can let the hands stretch forward, or for our full movement shell stretch, we wrap the hands around by the feet. And this is just nice to get that spine into an opposite posture. Instead of being extended, this is more of a flexed position of the spine. There we go. Hope that helps you to enjoy the exercises that we do when we're on our belly and to get that control. It's mastering that if you do have back pain, if that's your movement pattern, is often very successful at reducing the pain and making you more comfortable through the other activities in your life. So, all right, thanks for joining. Ciao.